Okay, so after quite a stalemate in the trade window yesterday, throughout the whole day, effectively, we got something really late by way of the Age. A reputable source within the team at the Age have disclosed that Dan Houston's preference is to get to Collingwood. Now, we must take this with a grain of salt because this could just be people involved within this negotiations manipulating the conversations and trying to maybe deter and scare away other interested teams like North Melbourne and Carlton. So I am mindful of that, guys. And we've been doing live trade streams every day throughout this trade window. So hopefully by 4:30 today, we'll know a lot more about the situation. A bit more of transparency would be nice. But if this is true, this is massive because I guess it would create a sense of urgency for Collingwood to wrap up what they're dealing with when it comes to the Gold Coast side of things. With Gold Coast at the moment, we're trying to send Noble and a future first, and exchange we're hoping for pick 13 and 23. There's rumours that we want to try and retain pick 23 amidst all these trade conversations with Port and Gold Coast. Is it likely? Once we negotiate with Port Adelaide, how likely is it that they're not going to want 23? Unlikely they're going to want it, especially with Jack Lukosius in this conversation as well. What do Port want or what do they need to get Jack Lukosius over the line? Do they need that future first that we're sending to Gold Coast for pick 13? So, because we are sending, sorry, let me explain that again. We are sending, once we're done with Gold Coast, it's likely we're going to have to send pick 13, 23, and Joe Richards to Port Adelaide. So we're giving up quite a bit there, and it seems like Port will not accept anything less than that, considering he's a two-time All-Australian. We know that. He's the best half-back flanker in the AFL, and with the way the game is played these days, there is a high value put on these types of players like Dan Houston, who can also play in the midfield and has versatility, which is right up Collingwood's alley. So we are going to have to give up something for Dan Houston, a significant amount. There's two camps in the Collingwood army. Some like it, some hate it, some want us to go to the draft. But Collingwood are perpetual winners and perpetually competitive. So I'm going to trust the winning culture, the established culture at the club, and trust that what they're doing is going to work out for us in the coming years, and live and die by that sword. They're going to get it wrong and they're going to get it right, and we're just going to stand by them regardless of the decisions they made. I think we've seen success, prolonged success, so just trust the process is what I'm trying to articulate to you guys. We've already said he's the best halfback flanker in the game. He's versatile, but he also adds room and flexibility for other players in the team. When it comes to Jack Crisp, who's played in the halfback flank at times, won't need to go there. Hasn't played there last year, but basically writes that off now and allows Chris to play high half forward, wing, sometimes midfield. It gives Pendlebury the option to play in the back line or on the wing. With Houston there, maybe he's not as required if he isn't to land at Collingwood. I understand that, but it does give some versatility for Pendles to play where he needs and to, I guess, even miss games if needed throughout the portion of next year. We have 5 players on 1-year contracts, so I don't imagine those 5 players playing every game next year. And when you bring in Perryman and Houston, naturally we'll become less dependent on them. And we will see that transitional period that we've been talking about, seeing these players retire and ensure that Collingwood, their squad, doesn't fall off a cliff when these integral players who are on 1-year contracts retire. So that is my, I guess, interpretation of all of that. What else are we looking at? Josh Daicos as well. What does that do for Dan? If Dan Houston comes back in, do we get to see Josh Daicos back in that All-Australian position on the wing? Does Josh Daicos roll more into the midfield? I feel like there's going to be times where we're going to see Josh Daicos play a lot more midfield time next year. He's too good not to be in there. If he's anything like his brother, who shares the same surname, plays really well off the half-back flank like his brother did in his formative years at Collingwood. You could argue Nick Daicos is still within his formative years, but his first 2 years was off the half-back flank. Josh Daicos did that very well last year. So who's to say Josh can't play midfield if Houston's in the back line? That's my question, my burning question for 2025. What else have I got? We have Finlay Macrae we've heard that Finlay Macrae wants out and is seeking a potential trade elsewhere, although the interest would be limited. So where does he go? What is he worth? I would say Finlay Macrae right now, at best, is a third round, fourth rounder coming back to us. That's my honest opinion. If he leaves, it probably saves Sullivan as well. It spares him an extra year on the list, gives us room to keep him within the squad. And with Sullivan rookie listed at the moment, he could remain there and then potentially elevate another player or something of the likes to the senior squad. So that's the nitty gritty of it. I won't dive too deep into that as that's not my forte, but I understand that Finlay Macrae leaving naturally would leave an opportunity for Sullivan to have his contract extended for another year. And look, I wish Finlay Macrae all the best if he leaves. It's unfortunate. He was hyped up and performing so well in the preseason. It didn't work out. I'm just scared that the same thing is going to happen to Ed Allen. And we have a responsibility as fans not to, I guess, get too overzealous and excited and put too much pressure on Ed Allen going into this preseason, because it's a similar timeline that Ed Allen shares with Finlay Macrae. Similar draft pick, similar age, and everyone's expecting Ed Allen to blow up next year. But he only played 2 games this year. And he played against Melbourne, and yes, he played really well, and he announced himself, so to speak, right? But you got to remember, Melbourne were playing for nothing. And if you remember watching that game, it really looked like they were playing for nothing. It felt like it was just training out there. They were witches' hats at times, Melbourne, particularly in that first half. So let's give Ed Allen a bit of breathing space, let him develop as needed, and don't expect too much from him next year. If he breaks out and fucking takes the world by storm, amazing, huge W for Collingwood, but just be patient with him. Let's not jump the gun and run into the same issues we had with Finlay Macrae, because we've really missed the boat on this one with Finlay Macrae. He had such an opportunity, and I think if things went differently for him this year, he could be a different player. But ultimately, fundamentally, at the same time, Finlay Macrae has some, I guess, holes in his game that are hard to work on. His inability to take the ball from the inside to the outside. He just throws the ball on the boot and hopes for the best. That, unfortunately, doesn't cut it in this modern game. You need to have an inside game, an outside game, an element of composure. And unfortunately, just winning a hard ball isn't enough anymore. So that's where we stand with Mr. Finlay Macrae. But let's like I said, let's hope that by 4:30 today we have more news on the whole Dan Houston situation. Do Carlton now have to be more aggressive and go a different route and maybe speak to Fremantle, try and get that pick 11 to take to Port before we get a handle on it? Because remember, Dan Houston might have inadvertently announced that he wants to, or his preference of destination club is Collingwood. But at the end of the day, if Port Adelaide want the best offer because Houston's still under contract, then it's not signed, sealed and delivered just yet for Collingwood. So let's just hold our breath for a moment and revisit this at 4:30. See you guys at the live stream. Go Pies.